Alrighty guys, we've got some trigger warnings. We're gonna be talking about guns. We're gonna be talking about murder. We're gonna be talking about domestic abuse. If any of these things will trigger you, please skip this video. My biggest concern is your mental health. I don't want to cause you any pain. So, I'm living that mom life, and we also got a kitten recently. So the kitten will probably pop in a few times. Horrible, I know. I'm sure you don't want to see an adorable kitten. Yuck. Also, my kids are loud. So please forgive me if the sound is not pristine. I have children. It's 2003 in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Sam and Suzanne Peebles have been at a funeral and now they're heading home. Sam is an ER physician, and so he needs to get a little bit of rest before his early shift the next day. They're driving along, it's a wet, rainy night, and they see a man on the side of the road. He looks like he's having car trouble. And Sam looks at this man and he thinks, wow, he looks like he could be one of my sons. And so they pull over and they say, hey, how's it going? And he tells them that he put gas in his car, but it still won't go. And so Sam offers him a ride to the next town. And he says, oh, that would be so great, thank you so much. And he gets into the back seat. Now Suzanne is a little weary. She just has a bad feeling. She doesn't know why, she can't explain it, but something just feels off. But being the nice person she is, she doesn't want to let this guy sit out in the rain, so she doesn't say anything. They're driving along, they're making small talk, and this man they've picked up, he says his name is Michael. And they're getting along great, just talking, chatting, and they get to that next town they were talking about. So Sam goes to turn into this convenience store that he sees.
He pulled a gun, stuck it in my right side. He said, folks, I'm afraid we're gonna have to keep driving.
And a lot of people would have various reactions to this situation. But Suzanne Peebles, she grabs the gun to get it away from Michael. And in the middle of this altercation, he looks at her and he says, this is exactly what that old man did when I shot his wife. And she said that immediately she knew that he was a murderer, and so she let go of the gun. So you may have figured out already, this guy is not Michael. No, this guy is someone else. And who is that someone else? His name is Scott Eizember. Who's Scott Eizember? Well, we're gonna rewind it back to August 2002. In August 2002, Scott Eizember is married to Roberta Eizember, and they have 2 children. Their relationship is not good. Scott has a severe drinking problem, and he is always getting into fights with Roberta. And they're always fighting about the same thing, whether or not Roberta is having an affair. Roberta actually gets hit hard enough that she passes out. And when she comes to, Scott is still raging around and making threats. But this time, he's not just threatening her. No. He's threatening their 2 young children as well. These 2 children, by the way, are just 8 and 4 years old. So Roberta, she's had enough. Enough of this abuse, enough of the madness. She goes to the police department and she files a restraining order. And she takes as much stuff as she can carry and her 2 children with her. And she also files for divorce. So once her restraining order against Scott goes through, Roberta goes back to her apartment accompanied by 2 police officers to get the rest of her belongings. And as soon as they enter the apartment, they smell an awful, rancid odor. And Roberta is like, I don't know what that is. I swear to you it didn't smell like this when I left. And so the police go into the apartment and they do some investigating, and they go into the bedroom, which was Roberta and Scott's bedroom, and they see a mound in the bed under the covers, shaped like a human body. And so they approach the bed, they pull back the sheets, and under the sheets is a human figure made completely out of rancid hamburger meat. Scott Eizember has made this figure to look like Roberta Eizember, and he's left it in the apartment with the heat to maximum height and did everything he could to make it rot as fast as it could so that when she came back to get her stuff, it would smell like someone had died. Already have a pretty good idea of what this Scott Eizember guy's like, right? Even though there's a restraining order against him, continues to harass Roberta. He harasses her so much that he's arrested for it, for violating the restraining order. And he gets let out on bail, and instead of staying to stand trial, he decides the best idea is to skip town completely. So he gets on his bike, seriously, a bike, and he rides out of town. In September 2002, Scott Eizember rides into Depew, Oklahoma, literally, on his bike, and he ends up in front of the Methodist church. And working on the lawn in front of the Methodist church is John Wright. And John Wright approaches him and says, "Hey, how's it going? What brings you to town?" And Scott Eizember tells John Wright that the reason he's in town is that he is doing a cross-country tour to raise money for the victims of 9/11, going from Detroit, Michigan to San Diego, California. John Wright's like, wow, what a fun, interesting guy. Scott asks if he can pitch a tent and sleep on the lawn of the church for the night. John Wright says, why don't you sleep in the fellowship hall instead? It has air conditioning. And Scott Eizember's like, great, that sounds awesome, thank you so much. And the two men form a friendship. John ends up introducing him to his wife Carla and to their daughter Kathy, her husband, and her son. His daughter Kathy is married to a man named Mark Biggs, and Mark and Scott become fast friends. They have a lot of stuff in common, and so Scott is hanging out around their house a lot, doing a couple handyman type things, just hanging out with Mark. He's also hanging out a lot with Kathy. By the way, Scott told everyone that his wife and children died in a tragic car accident. That's what he told them. Scott lets them know that he needs to be on his way. A couple weeks later, Scott is back in town, and Mark Biggs is like, hey bud, why don't you come stay at my house again? And so he's staying there for a little while, and he and Kathy become more than just friends. They become lovers.
He just said all the right things.
And after a little while of this, Scott actually sits Mark down and says, hey, Kathy and I are in love, and you need to move out. And Mark Biggs moves out. That's like all the information I can find on the internet. I don't know if it was a huge scene. I don't know if there were fists flying, screaming, yelling. All I found online is that Mark Biggs moved out. For months, things seem like they're going really great between Scott and Kathy. They're all loved up, having a great time. And then Scott's old ways start sneaking up, and Kathy recognizes immediately that something is very, very wrong with this man. So one night, she sits Scott down and she says, look, it was great while it lasted, but I just can't be with you anymore. We need to break up. I'm going to leave. I'm sorry, but this is just the way things have to be. And Scott seems like he's taking this fine. Like he's taking it really well. And so she's like, whew, good thing he's taking it so well. So she stands up to leave, and he gets up behind her. She thinks to escort her out the door.
I thought that he was coming up to like give me a hug.
Yeah, no. He grabs her in a chokehold, and he binds her wrists, and he puts duct tape over her mouth. He sits with her on the couch with her like back to his chest, and he's holding her around the neck. And he keeps repeating over and over again, I will kill you. You're never gonna leave me. You can't do this to me. You can never leave me. For hours. Kathy Biggs said this was hours that she was trapped like this with this man's hand around her throat. And finally, after several hours, he kind of just let her go. And she went directly to the police station and filed a restraining order against this man, which, good for her. Honestly, good for her. So the restraining order goes through, and Kathy decides she's going to move far away to the next town over to get away from Scott Eizember. She's mostly moved out of the apartment, but she has left a few things there because their lease is not quite finished yet. But she just wants to make sure when she goes it's safe to be there. She hasn't been there in a couple weeks. And she gets an alert on her cable bill that says, "Thank you for purchasing a whole list of adult films and the charges." And she's like, hold on a second, I did not buy these films and I'm not in that apartment. And immediately she's like, Scott's in there, he's in my apartment. She calls the police department and she says, I am sure that Scott Eizember is in my apartment. Will you please go check it out? And so police go over there and they see that indeed Scott Eizember is living in the apartment, squatting there. And not only has he been staying there, all of Kathy's belongings that have been left there are trashed. He shredded things, he cut things up with scissors, he set things on fire. It was a mess. It was nuts. And so they arrest him for violating the restraining order. Again, Scott Eizember is released on bail. And again, Scott Eizember decides, I'm not sticking around to go to court. And when he fails to appear, Kathy Biggs is just totally shaken up by this. She is like, that man is coming for me. And she was not wrong. So Scott's plan of attack here is he believes that Kathy is hiding out at her parents' house, at the Wrights' house. So he heads over to their area and he is looking for a place to do a stakeout. And he finds that place at AJ and Patsy Cantrell's home. So AJ and Patsy Cantrell, they are an elderly married couple. They had actually just celebrated their 50-year wedding anniversary.
They were wonderful, precious people who would never hurt anybody. Everybody loved them.
Scott sees AJ and Patsy leave for a walk, and so he breaks into their home through the back window. He immediately finds AJ's shotgun collection and he picks one out for himself. And then his next plan is to go raid the fridge. And as he's doing that, the front door opens. The Cantrells are back home.
I was just like, oh, and I assumed they were going to be gone all day. They actually surprised me.
Scott meets them in the living room with the shotgun raised, and he says, sit down and be quiet and I will let you live. So, of course, the couple do as he says. Patsy recognizes Scott because they had all known him from attending the church, and of course they know their friends, the Wright's daughter.
She said was, you're Kathy's friend, aren't you? And I said, yes.
And Patsy tries to talk him down.
I told her that I was waiting for Kathy to get home, and Kathy had done things to me that were wrong, and I was going to confront her about it, and then hopefully this whole situation, the whole mess would be over. I'm finding myself answering questions as Lee. I mean, I'm broken in the house.
And this is just making Scott more and more agitated. Patsy stops talking to him and she says, you know, I need to use the restroom. I'm just gonna go use the restroom. And she gets up and he turns around and he aims the shotgun at her and he fires and he shoots her in the back. Immediately, AJ gets up to defend his wife and tries to wrestle the gun away from Scott. And Scott proceeds to beat him with the shotgun until he falls unconscious. Scott then goes to check on Patsy and finds that she has died from her shotgun wound. AJ is unconscious and Patsy has passed away, and so Scott decides to drag them to their bedroom and leave them there. And then he went back to his spot by the window and he kept at his stakeout for Kathy. He said that he could hear AJ struggling to breathe and wheezing in the other room while he continued to stake out the house and across the street. Well, Scott finally got tired of waiting, and so he grabbed the shotgun and he marched across the street to the Wright's house because he knew Kathy was there and they were hiding her from him. And Kathy's son Tyler was sitting in the kitchen and saw Scott approaching. He didn't see the gun. He just saw Scott coming. And he's like, oh, I better go out to see what's up with Scott because he knows his mom has a restraining order against him. And so he walks out the front door and he sees the shotgun. And he turns and he runs back inside. And Scott starts chasing him and he shoots him twice in the back. And Tyler falls and he skids into the kitchen where his grandma Carla is making some pies. And she just screams, but I'd scream too. She's screaming, Scott comes in, she's like, get out of here, what are you doing here? And he starts to beat her with the shotgun. And he beats her until she decides she should play dead. So she plays dead and hopes that he'll walk away. So he hit Tyler right in his spine and it instantly paralyzed him. But he was able to get to his feet and regain a little bit of movement in his lower body. And so while Scott Eizember was beating his grandma with a shotgun, he went as fast as he could to get the keys to the truck and go get help. And Scott hears him getting away. So he starts to follow him. And that's actually part of what helped save Carla Wright's life. Tyler gets to the truck and he locks the door and Scott Eizember is like trying to get in. And so Tyler starts backing out and he turns around and he starts to drive down the street. Well, while he's turning, Scott throws the shotgun into the bed of the truck and then he climbs in after it. And so Tyler's driving down the street and he's swerving so that Eizember can't like hit him with his gunshots. And he can't even get it loaded because he's like swerving so much. And Tyler's like, I just gotta get to the high school. I gotta get to the high school because his grandpa is the announcer at the football game that's going on right now. So he's like, I just gotta get to my grandpa and he'll get me help. We'll get grandma help. Everything will be okay. So he's swerving down the road. And Scott finally manages to get the gun loaded and he aims and he shoots right through the headrest. But Tyler sees him and he moves his head just in time and the bullet goes straight through. And then Scott aims again and he gets him in the shoulder. And it's just awful pain. I mean, he's been shot several times at this point, this poor kid. But he's getting closer and closer to the high school. And he makes the snap decision that he's going to ram the truck into this huge light post that he sees right next to the high school. And so he gets as accelerated as the truck can go in a short period of time and he just smacks right into the light post. And it works. It knocks Scott out. And so Tyler gets out of the truck and he limps over to the football field and immediately people see that he's bleeding, that he's injured. And everyone's like, John, your grandson. And so John Wright runs over and he's like, oh my gosh, Tyler, what happened? Are you okay? And he's like, Grandpa, it was Scott. He attacked us. He attacked Grandma. And John Wright is just devastated. At this point, he doesn't know if his wife is alive or dead. His grandson has been shot. But he immediately gets people calling 911 and get things organized. And Carla and Tyler are rushed to the ER. When the police get over to the Wrights, they see that Carla is indeed still alive, but in critical condition. But as they're putting her in the ambulance to take her to the hospital, she turns to one of them and says, please go check on my neighbors, the Cantrells. Check on them. And so the police go over to do a well check, and they knock on the door and there's no answer. They go to the back, they see the window has been broken, and immediately when they enter the home, they can see blood in the living room. And there is a drag mark from the living room to the bedroom. And when they open the bedroom door, they see that both AJ and Patsy Cantrell have indeed passed away from their injuries. So pointless, so unfair. Kathy Biggs goes to the hospital to be with her son Tyler, and she is just so upset. She just feels like she's ruined so many people's lives. She just feels guilt, she feels angry. She just is so heartbroken that this is happening. And I mean, her son is in critical condition, her mother is in critical condition. Things look bleak, things are rough. The police department launches a full-on manhunt for Scott Eizember. They are searching everywhere. They are going door to door. They are searching people's homes. They're searching barns. They're searching community centers, gas stations, everything, searching for this man, and they cannot find him. Well, Scott has gone to a nearby barn, and he's actually hiding in a hay bale. And he hears the police officers come and search the barn that he's hiding in, but they don't find him in the hay bale. And so he stays there for 3 days. And on the 4th day, he is like ravenous, he's thirsty, he's tired. He finally leaves the hay bale in search for food.
The sun came up and I heard people leaving the house, and I went in the house and got some food and change of clothes.
He also finds a pistol, so he trades the shotgun he stole from the Cantrells for the pistol because it's more lightweight and easier to conceal. On October 29th, 11 days after the murders of Patsy and AJ Cantrell, Scott Eizember breaks into the church parsonage where he met John Wright almost a year ago. And he's in luck because the church has a great storehouse.
He had butchered a beef, so he ate quite well while he was over there.
The fact that this church, where we had my mom and dad's 50th, the January before that, October, their funeral dinner, having, the family gather here, it's horrible.
So Scott is able to hide in the church parsonage for the next 25 days. And there's even a little TV in there, and he's able to keep up with the local news about him, about the manhunt for him. He's watching the whole thing in the church. Police even search the church parsonage looking for Scott, and they are unable to find him because he hides in the food pantry when they come to search, and they somehow miss the door to the food pantry during their search. So, I mean, they looked for him there and they couldn't find him. It's crazy. He had like the best luck. It's bananas. During this time, Tyler and Carla remain in the hospital. Tyler is in critical condition. He to this day still has lead pellets in his body. He had a collapsed lung, he had a ton of blood loss, but he was able to pull through. Carla also was able to pull through, but she had staples in her head and in her neck, and she said in interviews that she still has severe neck pain from the attack. A congregation member named Doyce Pittry came to pick up food for a needy family in the congregation. And so she went into the pantry, and she was very surprised to find Scott standing there. So she immediately turned and fled as fast as she could. I mean, she was 87, but I'm sure she moved pretty quick. And Scott came in hot pursuit of her, and she actually tripped and fell. She rolled over and looked up at him, thinking the worst was going to happen, and he bent down and he took her car keys and he pulled out of the church parking lot and he headed for Arkansas until he ran out of gas and met the Peebles. Alright, so now we're back to where we started. Suzanne has just let go of the gun and she is bewildered. She doesn't know what to do.
I turned to Suzanne and I mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," because I knew I had made a big mistake.
Scott tells the Peebles to keep driving south. So that's what they do. They keep driving south. And a couple of hours go by, and Sam is like, hey, normally on long car trips, we take a couple of bathroom breaks, and my wife and I, we really need a bathroom break, so can we please pull over? And actually, Scott allows this. But he makes them turn off the main road and go to a secluded area. And when Sam turns off the car and is about to get out, Scott says, okay, the gun's loaded. Either of you try anything at all. I will not hesitate to kill one of you or both of you. I'm already facing death row in Oklahoma. Being a physician who works in the ER, Sam is no stranger to high-stress situations. So he's using his experience in the ER to help him be as calm and as accommodating as he possibly can be. He said he was trying to not agitate or upset this man in any way. He was just doing everything he said in hopes that it would keep him calm enough that he and his wife would live through this situation. And then there's Suzanne. Suzanne took the alternate approach.
I kept him fussing with me to keep him from searching the car.
Because Suzanne has a gun, and it's just barely out of reach in the side pocket of the car. And if she and Sam can keep Scott distracted long enough, one of them can get to that gun. Scott Eizember picked the wrong middle-aged couple to hold at gunpoint. Let me tell you, these people are badass. They get out, they do their bathroom break, they get back in the car. They're not able to get the gun this round because Scott is really watchdogging them. He tells them to keep driving south. He says he wants to go to Texarkana. And then they get to Texarkana and he says, okay, we're gonna keep going though. And then the next town comes up and he says, we're gonna keep going. And then the next town comes up and he says, we're gonna keep going. And the tension in the car is just building and building and building. And finally, Suzanne just looks at her husband and she says,
he's going to kill us. I just said it out loud. And there's a song that the people sing at all the funerals. It's I'm Bound for the Promised Land. And Sammy hummed that to me, let me know that he thought that he was going to kill us too.
By this point, they have driven over 300 miles from Arkansas to Texas. And Sam decides he is going to fake that he needs another bathroom break in hopes that he can reach the pistol that's hidden in the side container of the car. So he starts kind of squirming. He's like, hey, I've really got to go to the restroom. Can we please pull over, please? I am like dying here, dude. Please, can we pull over? And Scott allows this again. And he's like, okay, no funny stuff. And as they're pulling to the side of the road, he looks at Sam and he says, how much life insurance do you have on her? And Sam is just angered and terrified at this statement. As they pull to the side of the road, Sam's like, this is it. I can get the gun. This is gonna work out. It's gonna be perfect. Scott and Suzanne, they get out at the same time. And while they are closing their respective doors, Sam leans over and grabs the gun. And while he is opening his door, he cocks his gun to hide the sound. And he gets out and it's pitch black and he can't see very well. But he hears like shuffling feet next to him and he turns and he opens fire. Hey, so I'm in the middle of editing and I just realized this needs some clarification. So when Sam and Scott are struggling over the gun, they're fighting over the Peebles gun. Scott still has in his possession the gun that he stole from the farmhouse. He's just trying to get Sam's gun away from him. So hopefully that made this section make way more sense. Back to the video. Scott is able to get control of the gun and he starts beating Sam over the head with it. And Sam just looks at the heavens and he's like, Lord, I'm coming home. And he decides to play dead. So he's laying there limp. And Suzanne runs around the side of the car and she's like, don't kill him, don't kill him. And Scott stands up with the gun and he's like, I'm not gonna kill him, I'm gonna kill you. And he puts the gun to Suzanne's head and he fires. And nothing happens. The gun is broken. Seeing that the gun isn't working, Scott smacks her in the head and she goes down. He runs to the car and takes off. And Suzanne and Sam, they just hug each other. They're like, we're alive, we're okay. Another car comes by and they flag them down and that person helps them get police involved and they file a report and they get help. When Sam did those 8 shots in the dark, he actually hit Scott with 3 of those shots. So Scott went to a nearby store to get supplies. He went up to the cashier and he flashed his gun instead of paying. And the cashier was like, go ahead, sir, go on. And he goes out, and immediately the cashier calls the police, gives a description, gives a license plate. And so the police pull him over and they arrest him.
Nashville, Arkansas man has been charged with a variety of crimes, including murder. Scott Eizember has been charged with the October 18th shooting death of an elderly couple in Oklahoma. Sunday, Eizember allegedly kidnapped Dr. Sam Peoples of Nashville, Arkansas, when he caught a ride with the doctor and his wife. But Peoples ended up shooting Eizember with a gun he had in his van. Peoples says he's not a hero, he just did what he had to do.
Scott Eizember was convicted of 2 counts of felony murder, and he is still to this day sitting on death row. And that is the crazy story of Scott Eizember and the middle-aged couple who kicked his butt. Wild, wild story. When I first started researching this, I only knew the part with the Peoples. I didn't even realize that this man had gone on this crazy rampage for about a month. He was in hiding. He'd killed 2 people. The reason I wanted to do this story is because, man, the Peoples are rad. They were able to figure out a way to get out of this situation alive. I think it's super hilarious that Scott traded that shotgun for that pistol, not knowing it wouldn't work. I mean, how lucky for Suzanne Peebles that he did that. That saved her life for sure. I really do believe it's in people's nature generally to be helpful and caring toward other people, but stories like this, they do make you think twice, because that person on the side of the road, you don't know if they're gonna be Scott Eizember or if they're gonna be a nice person who just needs a lift, you know? Have you ever been in a crazy situation like this? I've definitely been in situations where I had to trust my gut, and I'm sure I've kept myself out of harm's way more times than I probably want to know about.
I don't think you ever get over anything like this. I drove by a couple guys in the ditch here a couple years ago in a snowstorm, and I had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and they were waving at me, and I just drove right on. I cannot do that anymore.